Starting.
Hi, you're listening to the raw, unedited version of the. Actually, you're watching it too, of the Sunday Morning Linux Review. If you wish to listen to our final version, please go to smlr.us.
The Sunday Morning Linux Review with Mary Tomich, Tom Lawrence, and Tony Bemis as the beeper. And this is episode 262.
The Specter of a Meltdown.
That's right. This is Tony Bemis.
Mary Tomich?
Phil Parada.
And Tom Lawrence.
Yeah, so interesting news recently, just after the holidays, regarding processors
Yeah.
and problems with
Oh,
processors.
so many problems.
Yeah, so,
It's cross platform, so we should talk about it, right?
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
this is a hardware problem, so
Mhm.
it is.
yeah, it's the way the processor speculates. Should we do some catch up real quick, or do we want to go right into this topic?
Why don't we save it for news and
Okay.
then we'll
Mhm.
do some catch up. So Mary,
Yeah.
what'd you
So, well, I read a paper on Specter, and
do?
I did do that, but I'll save it. What did I do? Well, I'm grappling with my SSD on my computer, my workstation, my non-Linux workstation, as far as I'll go with it, went down,
Mm.
and so I'm grappling with it, and I'm gonna probably hire a company, a well-known company, to help me with it. But anyway, so hopefully we'll get it cloned and get it fixed. So I was dealing with that. I was also playing around with, in KDE, the screenshot utility is called, I think Spectacle. Is that right, Tom? What is the screenshot utility called in KDE?
I use Shutter.
Oh, really?
I know there's more than one. Shutter's been my favorite because it's the way it hooks into everything.
It is called Spectacle.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but for some reason, my system occasionally freezes when I use it, or um, what happens more frequently is I get a little error message when I close it down. So there's something's going on with it, but other than that, it works. So I started to look into other screenshot programs, and I came across a screenshot compositor called Genie.
Hmm.
No, Screeny.
Screeny.
Screeny?
Okay.
Are you familiar with it?
I'm not. I'm interested though.
What's kind of interesting is that you have a setup of these little boxes, and then you just simply drag your screenshots over to these boxes, and then you have controls where you can change the angle of the boxes. You can change where the boxes are relative to the other, where a box is relative to the other boxes in the composite layout. I was pretty impressed with it. So I had a bunch of little screenshots. I played around with it.
Mm.
It's very nice. And so then what it does is it will it saves it as a graphic so that you can then drop it into maybe a website or something like that. I didn't do a deep dive into it because I was ultimately looking for a screenshot program, not one that takes screenshots and arranges them. But I just happened to find that. So
That I like that a lot. That is superior to what Tom's been doing for a very long
really,
time.
really, okay.
So you're installing it as we speak.
Oh, great, great.
It's
So
Screeny QT. You have to get installed Screen IE QT.
there you go. Yeah. So anyway, I did install it obviously, and it's kind of fun playing around with it. But I like the fact you can put shadows and kind of give depth, the perception of depth.
Yes.
So or depth perception.
No, I like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really. I'm looking
So
at it going, wow. I didn't want to type my password, so I'm gonna wait since I was like, whoa, caught myself. I'm so quick there.
you can always shift it. But
Yeah.
anyway, so that's kind of what I did, and then of course there was the holidays and all that stuff, and
Yeah.
freezing stuff off,
Yeah, it
freezing
was
parts of my body
cold
off. I'll tell you.
last night, yesterday
Mhm.
morning, or yeah, it was really cold. We got down to -10 for us, right?
My ivy is going to get killed.
-7.
I have ivy on the fence, and
Uh-huh.
what I like about it is it shields, from view, from the street view. And about 4 years ago, when we had that really cold winter, the ivy died. So it's taken 4 years to grow back up.
Oh,
I
Oh
think the ivy
no!
maybe, well, we'll see. But anyway, so other than that, that's essentially what I did, and here we are.
All right.
What about you, Tony?
Uh, you have you heard of Collabra online?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of like Google Docs that you can, but it's open source. And I got it working with my Nextcloud.
Oh, awesome.
Cool.
So yeah, so it's anytime you click on a document, Excel
Mhm.
or .doc or the .dot
Now this is with your cloud at home.
or yeah,
You're
on my
on your.
Nextcloud at home.
Oh, okay.
How does the phone app work, or have you tried it?
I haven't tried it yet. But what's interesting to get it working, I guess it's so complex to try to get it working right that they created a Docker image, and that's the instructions they give you. So I'm running a Docker image, uh, on the same server that's running my Nextcloud, and then you put in a proxy, a web proxy that connects over to it.
Hmm.
And it took me almost 3 or 4 hours to get it completely working perfect. But it's just because I had to go through and like turn off services and stuff to be able to get the Let's Encrypt cert to come down on the new
Oh, gotcha.
for
Okay.
the new domain name, and then
Hmm.
return it back on and or turn on my other stuff. And so it was just like a little convoluted. And I'll probably have to do it again in 3 months. And I had to do it like the cert only manual way.
Yep. That's how we run uh, issuance tests with cert only.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
If you would like any help with that after the show, let me know.
yeah.
I might know a guy or two.
Right. So that was the big thing that I did over the holiday weekend, other than presents and playing with the kids. And
Hmm.
so yeah,
Good. Good.
Phil, what's up?
My wife and I are just about done closing on our house.
Excellent.
We got the paperwork sent over to the title company. We've got the home insurance policy. Um, we've got our money waiting to be quickly flown out of our bank account.
Yep.
Home life stuff is going really well. Uh, I fixed up a bunch of cast iron pots and pans again through my electrolysis tank. That was a bunch of fun because science.
Yes.
And as far as work stuff has been going, we deployed Acme Staging version 2, which has wildcard support.
I was wondering when that was coming out.
For everybody who uses Let's Encrypt. That came out on January 4th, and that was a bunch of fun.
Hey,
Yay. So
That
it's
might-
in production now?
It's in staging,
Okay.
should be in production end of February.
Awesome.
all right.
So far, things are looking good. You can track Boulder on GitHub. It's pretty fun.
Cool.
How about you, Tom?
Boulder. Wait, what is Boulder?
Boulder is the Let's Encrypt CA and other software.
Ah,
It's the application that we run. And when you get a certificate, you get it from Boulder.
Is it based out of Colorado?
It is not
Okay.
Uh,
Figure out how Boulder figured into it.
Acme,
Oh.
like
Yes.
Looney Tunes.
Looney Tunes.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Coyote.
That's great.
Oh, nicely done.
Well, I'll follow up on that. Let's Encrypt love. I moved over, so I've over the years I've had a hosting company for a long time, but I've not really been pushing it. So now we're deciding to revive it and push it because I had some incidents with the previous hosting company, and they kept talking about for the last year offering Let's Encrypt. So I moved over to a new hosting company. Let's Encrypt comes default with every install. Matter of fact, they've absolutely done a wonderful
Nice.
job. When I set up a new website within the system, they just create it for you without asking.
Right on.
You actually by default would have to turn it off. So and they give you an option to turn it off if you want to replace it.
But who would want to do that?
Who would want to do that? So if you don't install an SSL, it automatically installs it for you within about 2 hours of the website being set up, which is really they have a very nice automated system that works wonderful for it. So
very cool.
big shout out to the guys over at A2 Hosting for developing that. That's yeah. It's like because at first I was like, how do you turn it on? And as I opened up a ticket, I'm like, oh, you just gotta wait. But before they had a ticket within an hour, like you didn't wait long enough. And I'm like, I looked, I'm like, oh, it's already there. I thought
Can you
guys
say
fixed
the
it.
name of the company?
Well, no, A2 Hosting.
Oh,
Oh,
it was,
yeah.
oh, did you say that?
Yeah, I
Oh,
said
I'm
shout out
sorry,
to
I
A2
missed it.
Hosting. No,
Okay.
they're I'm really happy with them. Their
I
support
must have been
good.
reading.
Yeah.
I like them. That's where SMLR has been
Oh,
for the
okay.
last 4 years, and
We've had very little problem with them.
right.
Yeah, we bought a bigger reseller account with them and set it up because it's not really worth it. Some people are like, oh, do you have your own data center? I'm like, it's just too much work.
Mhm.
our,
Mhm.
our angle on hosting is not to be the cheapest hosting. It's to be, you can call us.
best.
Well, the best. You can
Yeah.
call us. We'll offer you help. We will walk you through things. A lot of people just want their website hosted, not a lot of details. If you're looking for a bargain basement cheap web host, sorry, that's not.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not us. That's not our market. So there's plenty of people offering hosting for $2.99 a month or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you want nice SSL and everything else. But back to other things that I did.
Oh yes.
Um, holidays, kids, all that fun stuff. But Zen server. So I'm a big fan, and I did all this great YouTube videos on Citrix Zen server and entire virtualization
Mhm.
tutorials and everything else, and it's become really popular. But then Zen server decided, Citrix decided, I should say, because they took over the kind of the Zen open source project, and what they do is they compile it but add a few closed source things in there and features, which is fine, because they make kind of a cool interface for it. They decided to, when they went from 7.3 or 7.2 to 7.3 version, to remove a bunch of features that were all in there already. So they took away the HA and some of the other stuff, and they're like, you had to buy licenses. Yeah.
I'm shaking my fist. You
Yes.
can take my HA from my cold dead
Cold
admin
dead.
hands.
So this is where things get fun. Tom did a rant video on it. The rant video got popular, and Citrix watched my rant video. A project manager from Citrix reached out to me.
Oh.
And they said they're really looking at the community feedback, and I replied, backlash, you mean? And we were absolutely snarky, but he took it all in stride, realizes that this is a big concern.
Mhm.
But then the people over at Zen Orchestra, who make a web interface to go on top of Zen, they retweeted my stuff. Then they came up with their own idea. They're reviving the original Zen open source project, and they're going to they're forking it from Citrix and coming up with their own and
Yeah.
putting some stuff behind it. So they're going to put all the features that Zen took out and then add more and go full web interface as opposed to the Windows interface. So that's been kind of exciting interacting with all those people. Like, I'm part of something. It's exciting, and
Yeah, that's
people,
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I said, I even said I'll even help with documentation. I'll contribute. So I'm not a coder, because they're looking for. They have like 4 people that are really good coders on there, but they're looking for other help.
Mhm.
So I mentioned them that I'll help with documentation. I'll even create some videos and tutorials on the whole project. So that's exciting.
Now, just to be clear, because uh, just because I'm a little bit confused, which is my own problem. Um, the Zen Orchestra team is going to take the uh, Linux Foundation sponsored Zen source code and then basically do the same thing that Citrix is doing.
Yeah,
Okay,
essentially like
I
that.
gotcha.
Yeah, they're gonna they're reviving it. It's called Zen. It's called like the Zen NG project. Uh, it's on their Twitter, and it's cool.
Cool, thanks.
It's all open source, all on GitHub. And it's not Zen Orchestra is one of the contributors. They found other contributors as well, so it's not
Okay.
just them. But they obviously, being Zen Orchestra and writing a web interface, have intimate knowledge of how it works, so they're already very familiar with the base.
If you've never used Zen Orchestra, it's really, really nifty.
It is.
It runs in your browser. You don't have to run a Windows VM to manage your Zen box if you
Yeah.
don't want to do a
Hey.
command line style.
They've done a really top-notch job for doing it, so it's a really cool project. I think that's the last thing I did was I did an entire open source, and I'm going to turn this into a talk at PenguinCon. I did a open source video editing video. It's the entire open source tool stack I use and process we use for editing videos, which is Kdenlive, OBS, Audacity, and there's all the things we use to do the open source.
Speaking of that, I saw, and I thought of you immediately. I saw an article that I interpreted it as a New Year's resolution for OpenShot. They vowed to crash less this year.
All right.
So
Hey.
yeah, which it kind of cracked me up. They are in 2018. They vow to crash less. So
I've been
Yeah.
trying, because this is the common question. So I've got several tutorials on Kdenlive. I haven't done any in OpenShot since I moved to Kdenlive.
Yeah.
But OpenShot's come a long way. They've enhanced and added a lot of the features, but they're still missing some of the features I really need. But everyone asks me, how do I run these on Windows? And Kdenlive and OpenShot both have Windows versions. They're both horrible. They crash a lot. If it would just render one single video,
why do I
would
not
be-
feel bad about that?
Yeah. my answer to
That's-
because it's the most common comment is, how do I get this working properly under Windows? Because they do have an instruction, and I'm like, sorry, I'm a tech guy who has put 45 minutes in time into my wife's laptop and who runs Windows on it, and I cannot get it to work properly. not without crashing, not without aggravating. My wife started a YouTube channel as well,
Mhm.
and she wanted to use the same tools I'm using because I can help her with them, but I've given up. I have. We got it to work on one computer. We don't know why. It works on Steve's computer, won't work on my wife's computer.
That's
And running the
weird.
same version of Windows, and I even tried it in a virtual machine. It runs worse and won't even open.
Oh, that's really
Yeah.
that's very strange.
A shoddy craftsman always blames his tools, but this Windows.
This Windows, yeah,
Well,
no real craftsman should run Windows.
You
We'll just
know,
leave it at that.
And your comment, Tommy, again makes me think about this past weekend. Well, actually, we're still in the weekend, so it's not past. But there's an open source screenshot tool available in Windows called GreenShot. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it.
I don't use Windows.
Uh,
Sorry.
well, and the only reason why I do is because of my financial markets platform. That's the only reason. But anyway, there's this great. It's an open source tool called GreenShot. And I thought, man, and again, that was all part of that whole screenshot thing I went through. So I thought, wow, I wonder if I can get this to run in Linux. So I made an attempt, and it did not work. Apparently, some files missing. But here's the thing: their FAQ says GreenShot is written with the Microsoft .NET framework, which does not run on Linux or iOS systems. And so I'm thinking, wait a minute, .NET Core or whatever. And they said, although Microsoft released .NET Core, which is multi-platform, unfortunately, .NET Core does neither support Windows Forms nor WPF, which would make it impossible to use GreenShot's existing code base. So they don't want to maintain multiple code bases.
Right.
But I thought, wow, if we ever get a chance to talk to those .NET Core guys, there's
Mhm.
a question for them.
Yeah. Well, I think
Anyway.
the other thing is wouldn't work, and probably it's part of one of those two
Hmm.
parts is it's that most GUI things don't work.
Yeah,
.NET.
that's heavily GUI.
Yeah.
But what's pretty cool about it is that you can take a screenshot and you can automatically send it to Dropbox, and you can do this, that, and the other. It's really pretty cool.
All right.
Anyway, so sorry, didn't mean to hijack that, but made me think of it.
No problem.
So, anything more, Tom? I
No.
promise I won't hijack. the
No, it's
conversation.
fine. I launched a new company, but that's not as relevant to any of this. So I'm doing social media marketing under its own name and stuff. So
Mhm.
I've been busy with all of that. Been busy, which is good.
It is good.
I think. No, I think that's
That's
all.
it.
Because I
Right.
talked about virtualizing my home last time, so
Hmm.
Mhm.
that's still going well. Nothing's broke. Virtualized PF Sense works well.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Once, yeah, and that's another tutorial I'm going to do because a lot of people ask that about how to virtualize your firewall and the methods, and yeah, I'm working on that video still. That's
Mhm.
going to be done hopefully next week.
I think that'll be an interesting one.
Well, there's things I did. I'm going to go in depth on the security concerns of why it's virtualized at home, where I'm less worried about someone breaching a firewall, but definitely I like a hardware firewall here. I feel comfortable with that. So,
Mhm.
but for home people,
Yeah,
good
well, you're
enough.
not a high
Sure.
profile target necessarily.
no, but I don't run any IoT stuff anyways. That's a whole other topic.
Right.
So
Yeah, actually, that's what I've been doing at home.
Alexa.
The last few days is tweaking my firewall rules so that when I get a couple IoT things, then I can have it just plug right in.
you may have noticed we have another network here. If you look at our Wi-Fi called Internet of Insecure Things, and we misspelled stuff, and it's funny. People like, you misspelled things, and I'm like, well, it wasn't an accident, but now it like secure is misspelled. I'm like, because it's not secure. That's my excuse for misspelling the word secure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then I'm looking at getting a Ubiquity Ubiquity AP
Okay,
access point. So
we get them cheap. So, and eventually, because we're working on getting sponsors, then we get more free stuff from them. Oh,
Awesome.
I'm wearing. I found fingerprints in a firewall, or I'm sorry, in one of the switches because I take things apart for my YouTube videos, and they sent us shirts and swag, and they sent us a really high end Ubiquity AP unit too. So
Mm.
we're hoping to get fully on their sponsored list, which means we'll get lots of free stuff.
awesome.
And
Nice.
I'll let my friends help demo it. So
Hey.
I run the APAC LRs, one in my house and one
It's
in my
amazing.
garage.
That was the one I was looking at getting.
They're really, really nice.
they are.
Yeah.
Never had a problem so
You-
far.
And if you want to borrow one, you can literally just borrow one if you want. I have one just sitting open because we lost the box to it.
Yeah, that'd
Well,
be
I know where the
awesome.
box went, but that's a different story.
All right.
Good.
Very cool. Well, we should probably move on
Yep.
to feedback.
We want to hear from you. Call 734 258 7009 or email show@smlr.us with your feedback and questions.
All right. So feedback. I think we got 2 emails about net neutrality since the last show. They were both on Christmas Eve.
So
See what people were waiting for Santa.
I think,
Yeah.
and
Right,
while
that's
you're pulling it up,
another-
because I remember the email, I don't remember who sent it, but I remember the email was a different organization besides the government running it. I think it's an interesting concept because you do have, ICANN is not a government institute directly. And I think there's some merit to it. It's rare, but here's something a lot of people don't know here in the U.S. If I say something's UL listed, which I see that tag on even things around
Mhm.
here on adapters,
Mhm.
you assume UL is a government entity. They're not. UL is an independent lab that came
Mhm.
up with certification that everyone kind of adopted. So there is precedence for it to happen, and people almost assume some of these companies are somehow have government affiliations, but they actually don't. So there is a concept of that, but how do we? It's the weird thought process of how do you grant authority to it for enforcement, because UL listing is, for example, is also a voluntary thing, not a thing where someone has to adhere to it. So the people prefer it.
Mhm.
When you're dealing with monopolies in the ISP market, we need some enforcement because I don't know if you've seen, but they have further eroded things. They changed the broadband requirements. That's part of the new proposal
Mm.
What new proposal?
for with the way they're doing the net
In
neutrality.
net neutrality?
What they determine is broadband. They're reducing the speeds that are which broadband. So I think it's down to
Hooray.
300 baud?
Yeah.
No.
there used to be two requirements. There used to be a 25 down, 4 up, or more was considered broadband. They're reducing that. They're also removed the clause that it has to have a certain price point. So even if you had to pay $10,000 a month for it, which in some places you have to pay a lot because of the rural area, then it still doesn't matter. It's still available. So the availability listing had to be a 25 and 4 and be affordable, so to speak. And I forget what the guidelines for affordable were, but they were a lot less than what they are now because they removed the entire affordable.
Mhm.
So as long as there's some price tag that can be attached to it, that becomes that becomes available. So they want to
Ooh.
broaden the scope because right now less than 50% of the has access to broadband at all.
Mm.
Less than 50% of the U.S. does.
Mhm.
So they want to broaden that further, and it's going to look like 80% just by a law change, 80 or 90% of the U.S. has access to broadband, if not 100%, with the guidelines being reduced. So that's an interesting side note to it. So I don't know how this can be enforced from a non-government entity. I know that was the whole.
Well,
I'm-
you know, it's
I'm
just-
addressing the
it's-
feedback, but maybe Tony found it.
It's just all part of making America great
Yeah.
again. I mean, it's doing
Yeah.
doing things.
Mhm.
I'll end it on that.
Yeah.
It's pretty close. Yeah. I mean, it was. So there was 2 of them. One was about the, how does it legally affect it, but then the other one was who should be setting the regulations.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a mess.
Lobbyists? No.
Mhm.
Oh, wait, that's how it's
Clearly.
done now.
Yeah.
This is how it's done now. Yeah, it's kind of a mess. I will note, I don't mind. I'll even throw money at Netflix and some love there. Did you see Netflix New Year's resolution?
Mm-mm.
No, I
They-
missed it.
Oh yeah, they had a tweet that's hysterical. It says, "We stand united with the world for net neutrality and for UFCC. See you in court in 2018." I'm like, oh, that's pretty good.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
good. So any other bits of feedback?
We had 2 more on the website, and one about related with the Arch Labs Linux.
The
It's still
review?
not fixed.
Huh?
Tom
But,
fixed it.
yeah, we were talking about
Yeah.
it. a little earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you,
actually
Tom.
changed it to be Arch Labs Linux instead because I couldn't find the shark one. So there's that's just a mess.
Okay, so we're all set.
It is, yeah. It says Arch Labs, even though I don't.
Yeah,
Sorry.
with the SD card file got corrupted. So
Yeah, I'm gonna
Mhm.
pull it off YouTube because I don't have any idea. I should have consulted with you people. Sometimes Tom thinks he's smart and he's not. This is how Tom learns. I make assumptions.
Well, we all do, but
The
the good
file
news
is
is
lost. I've done everything I can. I never thought to ask for
well,
help.
we're going to implement Plan B. So
Yes, humble Tom Moore. My wife will be thrilled to know. She maybe will be listening and say, "You admitted you're wrong. When you can do that for me?" Anyways,
all right.
let's get back on topic.
Right. And then there's one other comment about your review for Arch Labs, and he just says how there's a few things, the package manager and something else, how it's not ready for prime time, and is why spend time on a distro that's not going to be ready.
Why-
You know,
oh,
as
me?
a
Why should I
person to
spend
use
time?
it. No, not you.
Oh.
He's not going to spend time
Yeah.
trying that if it's not going to be ready for a while. So
Yeah, sometimes I what I try to do when I select a distros, I prefer to have a production ready one, but sometimes there'll be something about a distro that it's close, maybe it's a release candidate, but there may be some interesting aspect to it that I want to talk about or I want to experiment with, and then I end up working with it enough that it, in my mind, it's sort of it becomes kind of a review. So
yeah.
but anyway.
All right.
All right.
That was all that I saw.
And then something cool. So viewers, so people who go to smlr.us, our website, I'm working on a little script to pull some stats from archive.org. And then I'm going to throw that through GNU Plot so we can see trends from all the episodes. I think that would be pretty nifty.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Phil asked me a question and we went on a mission. One question was, how do we pull stats? I heard you could, and Phil's been plugging away for a while now. Like an hour,
Because
which is a
math.
long time in Phil time.
Because math. Oh yeah, the universal language. I love it.
Phil types fast, so there's like a whole lot of code written in the last hour.
That's right. You know, when you don't hear
None
Phil
of it
talking,
good.
he's coding. Yeah.
Well, your first 10,000 lines are never good.
First 10,000. Oh, all right. So, any other feedback, or was that pretty much it?
That's all I saw, unless something
No.
from you guys.
I didn't
No.
see anything else.
All right.
Okay.
Then I guess we're moving on to distros.
Distro Fever, where we cover the latest hot distro releases and news.
Right. There's a few interesting ones I saw come up. Well, IP Fire is a release.
Yes.
So if you're running that as a firewall, then make sure you get updated.
I think that's something exciting
saw that.
is just all the development going on into firewalls as a whole, software-based firewalls. I'm like that hipster. I was doing it before it was cool. Because I mean, my first, I want to say it was a fork of the Mandrake OS. I used to run a open source firewall back in 2001. Before I moved to IPCOP, because it predated IPCOP. It
Yeah.
was like 2000 or 2001. Then I moved to IPCOP, which I always liked, which probably I'm guessing IP Fire is related or a fork.
It
of.
is. It's it's a fork of IPCOP because IPCOP wasn't updated for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I know
They
the
didn't touch
project
it.
kind of abandoned.
Right.
And then I moved into PF Sense, and I've been really happy.
Right.
People keep wanting me to try. There's a fork of PF Sense, and there's a ton of controversy with it, a whole lot, including court cases and everything with OpenSense.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the OpenSense is a fork
Because
of PF Sense.
they did not adhere to the tenets of the open of the GPL.
They seem to have childish infighting as well. The people making fun of them. Matter of fact, the PF Sense people were directly making fun of the OpenSense people, and every time they have a flaw, tweeting like these guys are a bunch of idiots that don't know what they're doing.
That's not cool.
But apparently there's all kinds of difference of opinion because PF Sense is funded by Netgate, the hardware manufacturer, and they didn't like that. So the OpenSense, and that's I understand the whole gist of it. They partnered with another hardware company that's going to fund theirs.
Interesting.
But they were more interested in selling hardware than security, so their security flaws got highlighted a lot by the PF Sense people.
That's
So-
never good.
But it turned it devolved into debauchery and just and childish behavior. That's the best. I've read some of it, including setting up a website that looks like OpenSense. It's not. It's a fake website that makes fun of them. So,
Oh my goodness.
because they bought the domain like OpenSense.com. So there was an entire lawsuit over this.
Oh
I
wow.
tried to follow the drama as people wanted me to cover it. I'm like, I can't even sort this out because it's all speculation of who actually registered anything. So everything was registered anonymously, so we don't know.
Yeah.
It suspects that these people from PF Sense were acting childish. The developers, I don't know. Anyways, as much as I know about the drama, I can't make any clear assessments of who's actually at fault. I like PF Sense. The product is solid. And I got to admit, people who are writing code for firewalls and doing historically a good job of security, it takes a certain type of person to be able to do that. And I'm going to deal with the fact that they probably have outlashes when people try to call them out on things.
Sure.
So
sure.
Not that I'm justifying their behavior, but I'm just going to say we see it. I mean, we're going to look at Linus. He's a kernel developer. The guy's wicked smart,
Mhm.
and his tongue lashing on this Intel meltdown thing is
Oh, it was
hysterical.
fantastic. I've
It's
got it pulled up
fantastic.
right in front of me.
Yeah, we will cover it in
Yeah,
the
we'll
news
cover
section
that
before I
in
get
the
too
news
off topic.
section.
Other distros. I don't know
Fair,
what else.
Fair OS looks interesting. It's based on Linux Mint.
Funny you say that.
Oh,
I downloaded it, and
Really?
there could very well be a review of it coming.
all right,
Actually, I've started working on it.
sweet.
Hmm.
All right, so it won't be soon, or what? It'll be probably in a month or something. It'll come out.
Yeah, yep, few weeks.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, I think it's because of the holidays. There's not a big list of new distros. Some people took the holidays off for writing stuff. I mean, in fact, outside of security updates, I want to say because I do all daily package update notices, I don't think I hardly seen any package updates that weren't security related, and there were very few of them because I
Yeah,
think the
they-
hackers took some holiday too.
well, speaking, I'm going to push this up from the news segment to distros because it's applicable. But it looked like you can now download 1710. You know, remember the Lenovo? There was the I think the October release of Ubuntu, um, or at least Kubuntu did it. It was creating problems with the BIOS and Lenovo
Yes.
desktops, and I think they've got that fixed, and so you can now. I saw an article.
Well, it's much worse than that. It was Ubuntu was corrupting BIOSes on UEFI.
And you couldn't.
Right.
It's like
It's
bricking it.
because it looks specifically, and it's
Mhm.
called, I want to say it's called Linspire. It is a BIOS manufacturer, and it's hard to find this information as to who's actually using it. They know the problem, so they know if you have a BIOS that's built on this,
Mhm.
you will have a problem. The problem comes in if you try to run multi-boot or if the UEFI is set to look for a certain file. So there's some workarounds for it. So it doesn't destroy the BIOS. I don't believe it bricks the machine. I believe though the UEFI is hard coded to look for a Windows boot path in the UEFI path. So you have to do some tweaking to get rid of it. But because the way
Mhm.
UEFI interacts with the OS, it can push those settings into the BIOS and screw things up. So it's a pain. I read
Yeah.
the whole debrief on it, and I'm like, what a disaster.
Mhm.
And it's hard to get a good list because the manufacturers don't list. They'll say that I'm using a Lenovo here, and it says it has a UEFI BIOS, but they don't tell me who actually wrote the firmware for it. So if you have one written by that company, which
Yeah,
yeah,
and just to clarify, they are going to have those available this coming week.
Yeah.
Just to, I may have given the impression that they're already available, but that was incorrect.
we can we get to an open source BIOS because that's I know there's a project.
Mhm.
There's plenty of
There's
projects that do
LibreBoot,
this.
I believe.
Yes, LibreBoot. That's the name I was looking for. But we need stuff like that because we literally had to like, did it brick your computer? Well, I know who wrote your BIOS. I mean,
Well, see, but yeah, and apparently part of that bug was that users were locked out of their BIOS settings,
yes,
and it would make you were
there was some way you had
alluding
to.
yeah, it would make their systems unbootable even if the image were booted in live mode.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a mess.
Yeah, we really
But I
need
know it's
this.
been talked about. quite a
UEFI
bit.
is awful. We have a great dislike for many reasons.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So, and then what I also noticed on the DistroWatch page was that I think the rights to the name Linspire and FreeSpire were just sold.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that where did you see that at?
Um,
It's on the distro.
I went to
or-
distrowatch.com. Yeah, I think it was
Huh.
there. Unless I dreamt it.
I don't know.
I don't
Did
know.
you see Calculate Linux is on there? So you can have Gen 2. I could run Gen 2 and have Cinnamon desktop running.
Yeah, here it is, FreeSpire. They announced the organization has purchased the rights to the commercial Linspire distribution in its community branch, FreeSpire. I went up to their
Oh.
website, and for I think under $10, you can buy Linspire, which has some additional capabilities, including they said, and I don't know the degree to which this has been implemented, but support for ZFS. So I thought that was kind of interesting because ZFS is a very superior file management. Well, it's more than just that.
It's a file system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
yeah, so I saw that. Might be kind of fun to take a look at FreeSpire too as a review, or even just pay the $7 and download Linspire. Also, Robo Linux. Robo Linux first hit the scene back in 2014, and it one of and I think I took a look at it back then. And one of the attractive things about it is that they had a series of links in the menu that if, for example, you had a Broadcom wireless card and your card was not immediately recognized, you could click the link in the menu. It would reach out to the RoboLinux website and then download the whatever the driver files you needed, and then install it with the idea that then you could access or at least turn on your wireless and have it working properly. I thought that was a very well, from my perspective, it was a very ingenious way to accomplish these kinds of things. So Robo Linux is really they were releasing every couple months, and then we get to 2016. I think they maybe had a couple of releases. Last year they had one release, and this year they've got another release. So they've really slowed as far as the frequency with which they're releasing their distro updates.
Well, if there's nothing broke, then what do they need to fix?
Well, there's always that perspective. Yeah, that's a good point, Tony. I'll give
Yeah.
you that. No, I'll give you a lot.
Did you
there.
see Gecko
I-
Linux?
I did, and I didn't know if that was if you that was designed for insurance companies or what.
Geico. No. So it's based on OpenSUSE,
Mhm.
but it has all the non-free repositories too. So you
All
can.
the stuff people like. But, yeah.
Right.
So it's a safe bet that this won't be on Richard Stallman's computer. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. No, I did see that. It's been around for a little while. They've got quite a few flavors of it. Um, and I think you can. They've got it from both the tumbleweed, which is the rolling release, and then static, which is the standard SUSE.
All right.
So, Tom, you were going to say something.
I'm going to add. I just found something. I'm adding. I refreshed a page now. I'm adding it to our news.
Oh,
It's
Wow.
related to our discussion we're going to have.
all
Someone
right.
just released a proof of concept on the ARM processor for the Meltdown.
All right.
Hmm.
They got a GitHub link and how to compile it.
Wow. Well, good. We'll
Yay.
look forward to talking about that in a few
Yeah,
minutes.
those are our news section. So it just
Right.
So, any other distros? Because we could be getting to news pretty quickly.
yeah. I like I said, I didn't. Nothing else jumped out at me.
No, I was fairly quiet.
If you
Yeah.
are in the Docker container space, Rancher OS had a new release just after Christmas. Rancher OS, for those of you that don't know, it provides a very nice GUI that you can drag and drop a network diagram for containers and have these containers such as Apache or Nginx or MySQL or Redis or Postgres, blah blah blah, get spun up and networked for you just
Hmm.
by dragging and dropping.
Awesome.
Really?
So when you're
Oh,
trying
that
to
is
herd all
clever.
those Docker images, so then that's
Yep, it could help. I used it many moons ago, and it was pretty nifty. And they're still working on it, so good for them. It has a really interesting um, deploy feature and rollback feature if a deploy fails.
oh,
And I thought that was pretty sweet.
that's nice.
Nice.
Yeah, and just to talk about another distro that I saw an article on. I was gonna talk about this in the news, but I think it makes sense to talk about it in distros. And that I think a couple of episodes ago we talked about Amazon Linux releasing version 2, and of course I had never heard of Amazon Linux, and it was I think it was optimized for running in Amazon's cloud, but also it was interesting because this new version it's based on RHEL,
Hmm.
and um, so anyway and they're putting it out there as an enterprise version. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this proceeds.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you turn away from your mic, it gets quiet.
Oh,
So
so if I do like this,
yeah, but you don't have to look
Oh,
at me.
I won't
I
even
won't
look at
feel
you.
gypped if you don't look at me.
all right.
I look. There's
Yeah.
no one listening to us except for
Yeah,
people watching
that's
us. now.
Yeah, you guys count. Tony, you're getting the back of my head, darn it. But anyway, I was just trying to be polite. But yeah, it is based on RHEL, and then it uses RPM packages and also a modified version of Yellow Dog Updater, and the other Red Hat tools. So I guess we'll see. But Red Hat, they had a very profitable quarter last quarter. I think they exceeded and shot
Hmm.
up.
Yep.
So, all right, that's really all I had for distros
All right.
and news. No,
And
just
it's-
kidding. I got more.
All right. Well, I guess moving on to news.
Tech news and views.
So who wants to go first?
So we'll cover everything that's not meltdown related first. I think this will set the bar for because we're gonna have a meltdown on meltdown.
Yeah, I have actually a story that could be a perfect segue into the whole meltdown chip thing. So
Okay.
maybe I'll save that for. That'll be our segue into it. One thing I wanted to mention, I was out at Extreme Tech, and for some reason they had just an interesting assortment of articles, a couple of which I thought merited discussion today. One of them was the Windows Hello facial recognition, and this is actually from the a thousand or no, I have that wrong. I couldn't even say my little joke right. But anyway, it's from the a picture is worth 1,000 logins department, and that's, as I said, Windows Hello facial recognition is bypassed with a photo. And what they did, what they did is they took kind of an infrared photo of the person, and they have a video on the Extreme Tech's website in this article, embedded in this article, that shows the process they went through. Now, and it was really fun to watch because they held the picture up to the laptop, and boom, you were in.
Hmm.
Now they said that it has been fixed. In recent builds of Windows 10, Microsoft has added an anti-spoofing feature that prevents this photo workaround. However, it won't protect everyone. As the company that discussed this points out, not all users have upgraded Windows 10, because you know how some people are, like myself, if I'm using Windows 10, which is not all that frequently. You just turn off that because you want to control your updates. I don't want automatic. But anyway, so they said if and in corporate IT departments, they don't automatically have those updates. Those get pushed out by the IT department,
Based on an approval
imaged
basis.
out. Yeah, precisely. So really, it may be available, but whether it's implemented across the board is another
And this is a
question.
reminder: password should be something you have. Biometrics are something you are. So
Mhm.
it is, and it's uniquely. You can't wait. I'm going to get plastic surgery because someone cloned my face. Got to change my password. Just
Yeah.
break my nose.
Yeah. So, all right, looking good.
Yeah.
But they used, to make this camera, or this photo, they went and got an infrared camera for about $50. And so and this picture is really kind of interesting. It's kind of got that, not that greenish background, but that kind of
Yeah.
pinkish background anyway.
Hmm.
So that was one that I thought was kind of interesting. Let's see. I talked about Red Hat already. I think we already talked about the release canonical. That was in my news, but we got pushed that up. The other thing I want to mention too is that we've heard about all the devices that are susceptible to Specter and Meltdown. Do you know what devices are immune? Anyone? Anyone?
Nokia phones.
AMD.
Anyone?
I don't
All Raspberry Pi devices are immune to the Meltdown and Specter
Oh,
vulnerabilities.
Just run
This
the
was
cloud on Raspberry Pis.
this was from an article in Softpedia, January 5th. So I don't know if that's changed at all, but Eamon, or excuse me, Eben Upton confirmed today, it was I think Friday, that none of the Raspberry Pi devices are that none. Wait a minute, how did they write this? Here's what the first paragraph says. They confirmed that none of the Raspberry Pi devices are not affected. So if none are not affected, that means they're all affected. But the headline says they're immune. I believe that was a mistype.
What's the processor in a Raspberry Pi?
So in the Pi 1
They-
through 3, they use
ARM 1176.
uh, ARM 11 for the Pi 1, then the Cortex A7
Mm-hmm.
for the Pi 2, and Cortex A53 for the Pi 3. And none of those are in the affected core list.
Yes, the
Yep.
cores are ATEX, A57, and A72 are affected. So
Yeah. So they
So,
said you
yeah.
can. Yeah. So that was whoever typed that first paragraph. They had too many negatives in there.
for now, once someone's down the path, someone's gonna
point.
figure it out.
Yeah, I'm
'Cause
sure that they will.
Last week,
They will.
you know what you would have found? None of them are affected.
Right, you are, Tom. Right, you are. Right, you are. So I guess we'll find out. But
Yeah.
as of Friday, when they published this article, this poorly written intro paragraph, they weren't. Let's see. I think I want to say I think those are the items. I've got that one other item.
Someone commented that True OS is not effective. If you're not familiar with it, it runs everything in Ring 0 with no internet access.
Temple OS.
Temple, I'm sorry, Temple OS. I said True.
Temple
Phil corrected me.
OS.
Temple OS isn't effective. Go look at it sometime if anyone's curious. It's not a distro any one of us are likely to run because we need to connect to things.
All right. All right. I'll pass the baton to one of my podcasting colleagues.
Yeah, you know what I did find? A month ago we
What
talked.
did you find?
A month ago we talked about Linux Journal.
Yes.
I see
They
that
are
rebooted.
not closing.
Mm-hmm.
They're
It's
not?
Linux Journal 2.0. So they got a
Infusion of funds.
sponsorship. Yep, from the PIA, Private Internet Access Group.
Oh, that must.
I
bet
love
you.
those people.
I bet you my subscription put them over the top.
Yes.
I'll take no credit for that though.
Thank you very much, though.
It's funny. I got a discussion in my forums yesterday about PIA making some new, as I made the videos for PIA, I set up PSNs to do your whole home network. And I may do some more videos on PIA because one, they're probably one of the more open people, and they actively take the money they make from things and sponsor. Well, this is not a sponsor, but they did the source code audit for OpenVPN. They sponsored and funded the entire. They put some dollars behind it to do that, to have an entire security team pour through the latest code. So it went through code review, and what's nice is they're not doing it and keeping it for some type of closed source client that they run. They did it for the open source everything, and they're very, very open as a company, which I appreciate. So
Cool.
Yeah.
So PIA, I've been recommending it more, if not just because of other VPN companies, but the fact that they're actually supporting open source projects, not just doing so. It's not just about security; it's about the fact that they actually put their money where their mouth is.
And I was impressed. I was impressed with how easy it was to put it on my Linux machine, put it on my Windows machine. I mean, it just works. It's great, very easy to access, and you can. And I'm sure probably other programs are like this, but you can. Via the pop-up menu, when I right-click on it, you can control where you connect from, or you can just let the system automatically connect you, which typically for me was out of Chicago. So I had a Chicago IP address.
They also do things like they're very open about this. If you would like to run torrents, here's the recommended countries you should run them in. They are like exceedingly open. They don't hint around or beat around the bush. Like maybe if you wanted to do a thing, they are very clear on how you do things. They are also one of the only ones I'm aware of, and there may be another company I'm just not aware of, but they offer port forwarding on this. They have an API interface for high-level ports, so you can open up certain ports to your VPN, so you can actually run like an anonymous server inside there. Which, that's interesting. Apparently, their API is gotten. I didn't realize how advanced it was because I covered it before when I did a review of their product. Apparently, it's gotten substantially better. So where they have a whole command line interface to Linux, so you can actually interact with it better. I'm gonna be taking a look at it, and I'm excited. That's kind of cool.
Do you guys have any numbers as far as what? Because typically, if you connect through a VPN, I mean that's just another little layer.
Yeah.
Have you any numbers as far as the performance hit that?
I'm impressed. They're upfront about the
not
speed.
just about them, but in general. Is there some
Yes.
kind of a rule of thumb that
There's
you can
not-
expect a 2% or 3%?
It's pretty minor.
Is
I
it?
was actually shocked at how
Okay.
minor the hit is, but a lot of times they have their own rate limiting. So you're actually you face their rate limiting because they can't just give you that much bandwidth because it would cause problems. So they're upfront about it. Like you don't care how fast your connection is. We're rate limiting this particular node to 25, and they have the speeds listed per node.
Because I get market data streams, and what I've found this is during the day, of course, when it's really busy. So what I found is I unhook that VPN when I'm getting all that because I noticed it was a little slower. Not that not that it's a huge deal, but on my Linux machine it doesn't matter because I'm usually using that at night. So
The only problem I've come up with is I went to log into the university and they block
Yes.
that kind of connections from anonymized IPs.
Yep. That's actually become an issue where Netflix knows all PIA's ones and they've been blocking all of them. So if you come from one of their IP blocks, they know what they are. That's become a whole nother issue with the internet. It's like, cool, VPNs, all these companies are now blocking them. So I ran into that problem doing testing because people are like, well, you don't run it all the time. I'm like, I can't. I mean, it just breaks things. So now that's where I'm making more videos on how to segment your network. So you're, for example, anything you want to connect to Netflix, you want to put on non-PIA,
Sure.
and then your other surfing you put on there, but you're finding more and more sites that block it. So I don't even, it's an aggravation.
Mhm.
Mhm.
We want to be anonymous, but we can't. And now the ISPs can sell our data. It's a mess.
Yep.
All right, moving on.
It's okay. They'll just charge us more. Oh, wait.
Um, and then I found the article about running Collabra online in your Nextcloud. So
What is Collabra Online? For
It's-
those of us who don't know.
it's like Google Docs. So it's a web-based or HTML5 um, Office suite.
Yeah.
So you can it's not quite full like Open Office, but it supports the Open Office and the Microsoft Office file formats, and you can open it up and edit, and I
And
believe
multiple
it
people
does.
edit it at
Yeah,
once, yes.
multiple
Oh, that's really
collaboration.
I've
Yeah.
done testing with it. I really like it. And I just haven't tested the apps with it, but my problem with getting off Google Docs often comes down to the apps. We use the apps on our phone a lot.
Where do you download this from, or how do you get the capability? Just go to a.
So you have to have a Nextcloud server running.
Oh, well,
Um,
there, I'm out of that.
Right. So
All
yeah,
right.
I know
So you
it's
haven't-
not for everybody, but for small businesses, this is
Mhm.
awesome because you have Nextcloud. So it's like Dropbox, running in your own office. And that's how I use it mainly. Is I have a couple folders that are synced back to my server, and that's my backup.
And you can go to, and I'll throw this in the show notes if you haven't already. It's nextcloud.com/Collabra Online.
Yep.
It's
Yeah,
because
and
it's an
that's what I'm looking at right
extension
here.
to Nextcloud. It's built on top of that.
Yep. And so basically, what it is Collabra Online runs in its own Docker image. It runs in a separate server ish, kind of thing. And then you have to take Apache and do HTTPS proxy over to the Collabra Online. And then when you point Nextcloud to that URL, where that other server is running, and then Nextcloud, then every time you go to open up a Word doc, it opens it up in that instance. That's that software that's running on the Docker.
Cool.
Yeah. And in the directions it says to go through, and because it's HTTPS proxy, to you have to have a cert for that other one. So it's one more step. Go through and set it up, and I did with the I
Uh,
said it earlier.
uh,
My cert.
we were talking and you used CertBot to do that.
Yes. Yep.
Cool.
Exactly. And I have CertBot right here. Right. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you listening just to the audio, he's got a little EFF CertBot sticker on his laptop.
Yeah.
And
I do
so
not. I
does
need
Mary.
one.
Yes, courtesy
Phil,
of
Phil usually shows up
Phil.
with pockets full of stickers when he gets here.
Yeah.
Right.
He distributes stickers among us.
Yeah, it's great.
That's why his laptop has the most stickers.
Am I catching up? Of course,
You
I have a
you
larger
are.
laptop, but
I was
You
going to
are.
have another one,
Alright.
but I can't find the link for it now. So
That-
if I find it,
Alright.
I'll let you guys know.
all right, that sounds good.
That's our hacker cred or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's it.
Very cool.
So
All
Phil,
right.
so you have any news to talk about?
The Acme staging version 2. I have been pretty much heads down writing a bunch of support code to get that all working, and had a bunch of help from the team. So I'm really proud of that. It was impressive to see everybody on the team come together and help out in every way that they did. It felt like a big family.
That's great.
That's
but
wonderful.
In front of me, I've just got tons of Meltdown and Specter articles pulled up. Oh boy, howdy! It's
Oh,
Yeah. We'll jump
It-
into that. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing. Tom, you haven't shared with us, or are your news items strictly
Oh no, no,
okay?
I got some news items.
Okay.
So I have some related to that, and I have a few ones. So we'll start off. Well, we'll just go. I have mostly positive news, like
All right.
really good stuff.
Wow.
Beside, with the exception of the Specter meltdown, it was a positive
N-
news couple weeks. So
Good.
fiscal earnings over at our friends at not just Red Hat. We talked about Red Hat last
Yep.
time. Ubuntu made money,
Mm.
and so
Really?
yes,
That didn't get a. I must
it
have
didn't get
missed
the
that.
fanfare
It
for their
didn't.
27 fiscal year. $126 million.
What was it on?
Their head count. That's their total earnings,
Oh, okay.
and their head count grew from 496 to 566 people. So, and they managed to net profit though of 2 million. But that's fine. They mostly did focus a lot on adding and expanding the company. So they made money at all is wonderful in
Hmm.
the open source world.
Now, I wonder if someone paid them $2 million to get rid of Unity.
Well,
Oh, you.
the good
You're
news
so
is
negative, Phil.
yes. Well, the good news is one of the things they did was, and this was controversial, getting rid of Unity. They focused on all core functionality of the OS and less of the fluff stuff. And they actually had a lot of developers on UI and Unity specifically, and they did kind of repurpose them, I believe, into the company elsewhere because that was a big controversy about it. Because it was one of those things like they just really went all in on this Unity thing, and everyone's like, "There's no KDE. Like, there's already a competitive marketplace for the two big ones, and there's plenty of smaller ones out there for
Mhm.
interfaces. Why do you guys do this interface that doesn't fit the category of either, and you spend a lot of time and money on it?" So
All right. Well, now it's I'm sitting next to Phil, so of course his skepticism and stuff just kind of jumped over to
yeah,
me. So my question is, those numbers are those gap or non-gap numbers? Generally accepted accounting
oh, I believe
principle.
those are Gap.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe there's Gap. There's a link in the
Because
article.
non-gap, no, sometimes creative
Well,
accounting
well, here's the problem. There's
produces.
they're South American too, aren't they?
Oh,
So I don't know where their guidelines fall for
okay.
I don't
accounting.
think so. I, you mean South African?
South Africa. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
South. I said yeah.
Tom was wrong
Well,
again. Just
I
note
was
that.
wrong.
No.
So yeah, we are in the New York Times. Well, not us, Linux, but
Oh,
that's still important. So, New York Times did an article. Let's talk about Linux. Take a look at it, and that's interesting. It's not a deep dive article, of course, and you wouldn't expect New York Times to have a deep dive article. But the fact that they're putting it in the New York Times is an interesting topic for me because it's the year of the Linux desktop, 2018,
Of course it is.
just like 2017 and 2016. We're gonna be the 2%. I guess this is a little bit less of a positive story, but it did at least got them some fanfare. But it's a lesson in idiocy here. Um, Mozilla and Mr. Robot. So if you didn't know, Firefox recently pushed an add-on called Looking Glass, and carrying no description other than "My reality is different than yours." While it was a benign marketing campaign by the company, users assumed they had downloaded malware. This was a weird thing because this is where it's a lesson in stupidity. They didn't get paid for this. They decided someone thought Mr. Robot was cool, so they inserted a line from the Mr. Robot TV series into Mozilla like it was a sponsored ad, where it's stupid as it wasn't sponsored. They didn't even get paid for it. Like you screwed up your brand, you screwed up trust with the users, and you didn't even make money. Like at least say we'd at least think if you were corporate shilling, we'd say, oh, you probably needed a few dollars, and we could somehow rationalize it. Now we just think you're stupid. So that's my take on it.
there.
At least going, if you're gonna sell out, get paid, or you're dumb. Just sorry, Mozilla. Um, Good news is they did release 5704. Release notes include the Specter mitigation, so that's in there. And I think that was it. Oh, this is just something amusing. I like Linux gaming, which related to, and maybe our listeners want to throw some feedback on this. I made friends with a YouTuber that is called the Linux Gamer. Neat guy. He's been doing some other podcast shows, and I thought he's, I believe, willing to do an interview. It'd be remote, but he could just talk about the status of gaming and Linux. That's his entire focus. He has a YouTube channel. That's all he does is review Linux gaming, which is
Yeah.
so much. That is still anytime I do distro reviews or talk about stuff on my YouTube channel, I would switch to Linux, but I game, which is
Mhm.
exactly why my wife's laptop does not run Linux and why she has so
Mhm.
much problem with their editing. She plays games. The games don't work don't work in Linux, but there are alternatives, not to the game that my wife plays. But so that's one topic. And the last one is sshTron.zach latta.com.
Oh, SSH Tron is tons of fun. I've had that
Yes.
in my bash aliases
What-
for some time now.
You can
I'm
play
not familiar with it.
Tron is the little game, like it was called Snakes forever ago.
Oh,
where you
yeah,
do
yeah,
the little
yeah.
Snakes.
Okay,
Ah.
yeah.
Yeah. You can play it right in SSH, and it's fun.
It's 4 players, and you get red, green, blue, and yellow.
Yep.
And everyone's got their quote unquote light cycle, driving around, drawing different pipe characters on the screen.
Mm.
Yes.
It's really goofy, but it's a
But
good time
fun.
killer.
It's a good
Yeah.
time. It's a
Is
good
it?
time.
There's a YouTube video of it. You
Yes.
can go out and watch it. All right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you can just SSH in. And if you do install Bash on Windows, you can join us Linux folks. And eventually you should just format your computer in Linux so you don't have to install Bash on Windows.
There you go.
So
Oh.
back to Conical, the corporation.
Yeah.
It's based out of UK.
Oh, UK. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
That I didn't. Yeah. And I don't think it's.
I think Shuttleworth,
yeah.
maybe he's South African.
He is.
Yeah,
There
I
you
know
go.
he
That's-
is. I
that's
just
the
assume that's
connection
where the
there.
company was based as
Okay.
well.
There you go. Um,
So here
Well-
comes all the notes on the Meltdown.
well, and before we do,
Yeah.
I want to mention that, and because this article appeared in Extreme Tech, and it appeared on December 22nd, which I think predates the, well,
Yes.
as far as the public dissemination of this information, DARPA and the University of Michigan team up to build unhackable chip.
Yeah.
And so what kind of cracked me up about it is the fact that this came out, I think several days before, and I don't know if these guys were aware of it, but they, they're talking about software and hardware models as far as trying to hack stuff and not hack stuff. So I think it'll be kind of interesting to see how this progresses, especially in light of the recent news about Specter and Meltdown. But they, I found the article kind of interesting, especially because they're working with DARPA. Those crazy spooks, those government spooks. So anyway, that's all I
Yeah.
got.
Right.
All right. So the analogies and things like that. So this is where I have it typed so I can actually read from a script. And some of this I pulled because the register is where I pulled a little bit of this information from. They had a pretty good write up, but then I rephrased a little bit. But if you're not familiar with the way processors work, which very, very few people are, turns out they are as rare as Linus is. The people who design these processors are also a rare breed of people because microarchitecture processors become extremely complicated. And one of the ways to make them more efficient is speculative. This has been around for a little while, but it's speculative execution. So to reduce the idle time in most modern chips, speculate about future instructions while processing present ones. The process known as speculative execution. If they guess right, they save time. If they guess wrong, it's
You
just
lose time.
You lose time. It's just an error prediction. You're no worse off because it was done at an idle cycle. Specter attacks dupe the processor into making guesses about future instructions that wouldn't otherwise be allowed, therefore gaining access to privileged information within the kernel address space or data running in those processes. Basically, those designing affected processors didn't anticipate this scenario. They built a fence around the execution engines, were satisfied with the security and protection until Google Project Zero researchers and a few other experts brought a ladder to the party and broke it all. So, in short, the
Yeah.
speculative execution, things happen in series because the way programs work. So if I'm rendering something, I usually probably repeat the same instruction over and over again so the processor can predict that next instruction set will probably be very similar to the previous one so it can make guesses about it. It's like if I said A, B, C, D, E, F, you would just in your head finish G because
Q.
it's an assumption. Oh yeah,
Yes, that is called branch prediction.
branch prediction.
RaspberryPi.org has a really, really easy to understand layman's article
Oh, good.
about Spectre and Meltdown. At least from my perspective, it was super, super helpful. I did read the Google Project Zero README, but then I'm not a microprocessor developer. I don't understand how some of those things work. I plug the computer in, and then, well, some electrical magic happens,
Yeah.
and then I can run my operating system on top of it. But Spectre and Meltdown, for those who haven't heard, and if you haven't heard, well, you're in for a treat. They are side channel attacks, and just like Tom was saying, processes run, and as you use your computer, other processes are running, and they can read memory. Uh, uh,
Right. They should be running in
And they got
isolation, but they
got
don't
full
run.
reign of the memory. In other words,
Yes.
are they just limited to certain
Well,
address registers?
ideally, all the processes running in parallel, you should not be able to read from the memory tables. Now,
Mhm.
this is why we have address space randomization, and of course, FreeBSD started the trend of kernel space, the KMLR,
Kessler, yes.
Kessler, the kernel address space randomization systems. And the idea is each processes may not know of each other. They may run individually and not have shared memory. That way, my
Mhm.
password manager doesn't get to talk to my browser. Well, that's where this goes wrong. They found JavaScript implementations they were able to run inside of a browser. Now they're doing this by deferring the memory timing issues. They can defer what's in memory based on the time. It's very much like the Rowhammer one we talked about a few months back, where you're determining the timing to make assumptions about what's in the memory, and are determining the time it takes to get something done, whether or not the branch prediction was a certain thing or not. It's amazing, but they actually do. It seems like it wouldn't work, but it does work because of how fast processors go. You can aggregate the data very quickly because they're running at so many gigahertz, so many
Mhm.
parallel processes at once. I'm able to defer that information out, and it's just it's a hell of a mathematical equation to be able to think that way and be able to put that together.
Absolutely. So there are kernel patches that are currently available for Meltdown,
Yes.
but as far as Specter, the kernel developers are still working on this.
Yes.
So Specter isn't going to be just a kernel or BIOS or firmware fix. All software is going to have to be patched as well that uses high resolution timers.
Yes. And actually, they almost essentially they poison a high resolution timers in the browser. That's what Mozilla and Chrome have both done. Is drop a little bit of randomness into the high resolution timer that creates it breaks their ability to use that high resolution timing attack. So it's a really interesting way they had to do it. They just kind of poison it because high resolution timers seem like a good idea for speed, but this is where the speed comes in. And I actually pulled this from Phoronix, and because their initial talk was that we're going to see 20 to 30% hits, they're actually seeing a little bit less. And my speculation as to why, maybe Phil thinks about this a little bit differently, but when you start running stuff like Docker, you already kind of break speculation because you're running so many processes once on one processor, especially when you have a hypervisor, and then inside that hypervisor, you have Docker containers running. So the processor has a hard time predicting what's going to happen next because so many things are happening in parallel at once. So I think that's why they're seeing less of an issue, because it already couldn't use branch prediction to do as good of a job as it did on these single use cases. That's my guess on it, because I noticed when I read through the
Seems plausible.
kernel developer logs, they were testing it on like their own Core i7 CPUs in their desktop environment. And what they would do is they would apply the kernel patch, they would do a benchmark, apply the kernel patch, do a benchmark, and go, wow, we've seen this 20% hit. But you're running a processor. Think about a data center, or even my own Zen hypervisor here. I'm running 7 virtual machines that have their own virtualization stuff going on inside of them, and I have a 32 core processor running. So how good is branch prediction at that point?
The hit is very workload dependent.
Yeah.
So if you are running, if you're running a database, you will see a different performance hit than just running web nodes, for
Right.
instance.
Yeah, the database performance is the one I've seen. But if, for example, that database is dedicated in pulling up a lot of processor power, you see a hit. But if
Mhm.
you're like some of the machines that are just running a diversity in all the databases at once, branch prediction couldn't have helped to begin with. So anytime where branch prediction helps, and that becomes a very per server use case, because does that server have one dedicated database on it, or does it have a multitude anyways? So they're like, yeah, we didn't see a hit because it already couldn't predict what was going to happen next, because these 10 users have 30 processes under each user. So we've got 300 processes that we can't branch predict anyways. It's cache timing almost. It's kind of the same concept. It's helpful if you have a workload that can be predicted and loaded in a cache. If you are running unpredictable workloads, you don't get any benefit from it.
Now, for Meltdown, the Linux kernel 4.14.12 that was recently released. I'm getting this information from Croa.com, which is the blog from Greg Croa Hartman. He builds the kernel and releases it. Um,
Haven't heard that name for a while.
Yeah.
very, very nice guy. I got to meet him and shake his hand.
Oh,
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
wow, great.
So 4.14.12, if your OS can get that kernel, you should be running at least that. If you have boot problems, run 4.14.13.
And a quick way to find out is, isn't it uname
Uname
space
space
dash
dash A.
A?
Yep.
Will
Thank
tell you which kernel you're running.
Um, so there's also backports being done to 4.4 and 4.9. But what happens if you are in RHEL world? They're still running on the 3 kernel.
Oh,
Mhm.
So backports might not happen. I know that we did another round of updates at work. But there was a whole bunch of work for this page table instruction. I think it was called PTI, um, from a patch set called Kaiser. And Specter and Meltdown come out of this old patch set. Um,
wow.
Hmm.
It's crazy.
Yes.
I'm also going to leave in the show notes a warning. There's profanity. I'm not going to read it on the show, but Linus,
Oh.
he's
He drops the F bomb.
no, just the S word, which is shocking.
Okay.
He usually drops there.
Yeah.
Here's his. I'll just read the non-swearing part, but a competent
Just say
CPU
bleep.
engineer. This is his reply to Intel and this happening. A competent, and he puts little asterisks around it. CPU engineer would fix this by making sure speculation doesn't happen across protection domains. Maybe even if L1I $, that is the keyed CPL. I think somebody inside of Intel needs to really take a long, hard look at their CPUs and actually admit that they have issues instead of writing PR blurbs that say everything works as designed. The rest, he goes into other details in here. So,
Sure.
oh, at the end, he does sign it. Please talk to management because I really expect 2 possibilities. Intel never intends to fix anything, or these workarounds should have a way to disable them. Which one of the 2 is it, Intel? I mean, he was.
Ooh. Well, their stock took a hit.
Yes. And one guy managed to sell all the stocks as
So-
if he knew something.
Oh,
what-
I'm glad you mentioned that, Tom,
I
because I
figured-
saw that last week.
Yeah.
The
who did
CEO of
this guy?
Intel sells a bunch of stock.
Yes.
Was it a week before? A couple weeks?
2 weeks before.
Yeah,
Mm.
before this went public.
I've read that was an automated trade, but
Who set it up?
Yes. Well, it's an automated trade because
Before the end of the year?
you and Mary can clarify this if I'm wrong about it, because I'm not an SEC person. But if you have stock in the company you work for, you have to file with the FCC that you're going to do a trade. So you put in a trade order that has to be audited by the FCC to let them know that you plan to do a sell of your company's stock. You have to file it ahead of time. It has to go through a review process. And his answer is it was done before the release. The problem is if you look at the Project Phi, June of 2017 is when this bug report was filed. They
Mm.
went way longer than the 90-day filing because of the severity of the bug and the problems with it. So they gave Intel and other processor manufacturers a big heads up. 6 months is how long this has been known about. So they gave it a 6-month instead of a 90-day release. So this was well known inside of Intel as of June of 2017. So yes, he did file it early. It was an automated trade based on an earlier filing because you have to file it ahead of time. That's the same excuse the Equifax people gave, who also. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I have little faith in our government's ability to actually prosecute, or SEC's authority to well, not authority, they have the authority to it. Will they have the willingness or desire? I don't know. That goes off the rails and out of discussion. But yeah, there was plenty of prior knowledge. There was also a lot of prior knowledge because a lot of these kernel changes were happening without notes. This was a bunch of speculation. There's a write-up on I should probably find the link. It was a Python guy that wrote, he was trying to reverse engineer what the kernel changes were because they lacked notes other than it was for a security change, and the notes would be added after the release of the bug. This is actually a really interesting thing that happens in open source. People try to figure out bugs by looking at the code changes that are being submitted because those changes can't relate to the CVE because the CVE is not published. It is now, and they put the notes in later, but this is an interesting way open source is developed. You can still develop in the clear. We're not saying why we're changing this code, We're saying that it needs to be changed. And that's what was going on. So a few people tried reverse engineering it and looking at how it was. They were making guesses as to what the changes were coming. So we know it was out there. These guys at Intel were very on the up and up on it because there's no way you can't predict that your stock's not going to get slapped. So yeah,
Oh yeah.
it's a mess.
Okay.
What else? I don't think I had too much else on it. The
Do you
guys.
guys?
What's that?
Maybe I zoned out for a second while everybody was talking, but is there? What is the difference between Spectre and Meltdown?
It's
Is it the
Meltdown only
processors?
affects Intel, and it's a more you can get higher levels of access through it because you can manipulate the way the branch prediction works. And versus the other one is a more local. It has to run on the machine directly, and it's less of a threat. But it's a problem, like Phil said, with the Spectre's a lot of programming things need to be changed.
Yeah, it Spectre is such a problem because JavaScript is an attack vector. So
Right.
just going to a website with a non-patched browser, granted your CPU will spin up and start just chugging through cycles, but people who don't patch uh, are vulnerable to that.
And sysadmins who use browsers on servers.
Oh, geez.
They do. These
Oh.
people exist. They I'm sorry, but they do, and they create hell for people, all the other people who are real sysadmins that go, why did the previous guy that you just fired because your system got pwned do this? We don't know why he did
Well, I'll tell you why they do it. They do it because sometimes vendors who install things, um, who have systems and various software components that get installed on customer systems need to go in remotely and access things. Sometimes, depending on who's going into access, like a project manager such as myself, when I'm trying to check and see how the system was it installed properly, am I pulling up search results, etc. It's done in a browser. That that's why it sometimes happens.
Well,
That's a good point.
and we had we just had a security. Well, not, we solved the incident. They created the incident. Well, my clients bought a very large program to run their business. They paid like $25,000 in licensing fees for this program. So you're not talking about something that they bought for $99 online. They bought an enterprise level program to run their enterprise company. This was the solution the company did. They wanted us to give them admin privileges, which we kind of had to. Whatever, the server's dedicated to them, except for it is a file server as well. They just opened up C drive as the share, the entirety of the C drive. The D drive was where they were instructed by my email to install the software, and I created a share for them. The installer just opened up the C drive because he couldn't get it to work and left it that way.
Jeez.
Yeah, we fixed it and moved it, but like including they could just everyone had read write access to the Windows directory on the server.
Mm.
It was not put into production. We solved it before it was put into production, but I almost want to rant like, really, you guys are a company that services large corporations and charge lots of money, and this is how your guys messed up my server. So, on the topic for Onyx, PHORONIX, I have a link for the show notes. A whole series of tests on desktops and servers and Docker performance. They're doing a whole rundown of before and after tests. They have an entire lab they built, so they're publishing the finite details of what it's like to have it patched and unpatched kernels and what the speed differences are. And they break down a lot of detail for people that are really interested in that. So they've been releasing like 2 or 3 times a day updated reports for different programs running and everything. So it's really clever. They said the Docker ones are more promising, as in they don't seem to have as much of a hit, but they do show data performance, and encrypted file systems take a hit because of the CPU load it takes to run encrypted file systems.
Oh, sure.
And that's something that lends itself very heavily to branch prediction, because if I decrypt the first block, the next blocks are probably going to use the same instruction set. So branch prediction probably works really, really well for encrypted file systems. So breaking branch prediction in there does mean you see a performance hit on CPUs. Or hard drives, right, because of the CPU load. So, but yeah, they're got a lot of testing they're doing. Because people ask me to do testing, I'm like, I'm not qualified, I am not educated. These guys are already doing it, and they're open source lovers who they have their whole testing process is broken down as well.
Phoronix is fantastic.
They are just a great resource for things like that. So I'm gonna leave them. I'll leave the testing to the experts over at them, and there's more testing. Probably, I mean, this was just this morning. I think they released this one, so by tomorrow they'll probably have more. So my link in the show notes, we'll just go to them for the testing.
Right. So I'm one thing. Maybe I like again. I was trying to follow the whole thing. I don't know whether I'm just foggy today, but
It's a mess.
I don't know if
You're
we
not
didn't talk
alone.
about it. But the real world, like what people should be worried about and how this affects
Make sure
people.
you update. Make sure you get your security updates. in
Yeah,
appliance.
make sure
browser
you
update.
install your security updates. But what it actually does is, so I mean, we talked about it, it can access memory space from other
Yep.
programs. And what you should be worried about is that in the memory space is where your decrypted username and passwords are held, or
Right.
or other sensitive information that you don't want. Your like you said, your LastPass can be running is a separate memory space than your web browser. But if you hit a website that has a JavaScript running this exploit, then they would be able to try to figure out where LastPass is
Right.
decrypted its blob to, and then be able to get your username and passwords.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's really important for you to go through and update your computers.
Especially the browser, because that's for the consumer. In the majority of people, that is the one of the huge attack vectors. For example, on my machines, I run my own virtual stack, and I'm running all the software in there, so it's less likely because I trust all the. As long as I trust all the software that's running in my virtual server stack, it's less of a concern. I still patch, I still keep everything up to date. Less likely of an attack vector. My laptop running a JavaScript that someone embedded on a website, and my password manager being on there, huge security risk. That's where the threat model comes from.
And not only just passwords, but
Anything.
these could be VM escapes as well. So you
Yes.
could leave the confines of your virtual machine and get into another virtual machine. Let's say if you're on shared hosting, such
Right.
as Amazon or Google Compute,
Mhm.
and then you're in someone else's domain.
Right. Yeah. So that's what don't think that you have your VM host is secure, that and you don't worry about your guests, the VM guests. You got to make sure all of your VM guests are secured and locked down also.
For our
'Cause-
Windows listeners, I will comment on how to mitigate it. Install Linux. No. For whatever
I
reason,
was thinking that.
if you're running Windows 10, they patched it immediately. If you're running, by the time you listen to this podcast, well, this Tuesday, if you're
Windows
running the
7.
previous versions of Windows that are still supported, which is 7 and Vista, you will get an update on Tuesday, unless, and I'll say this, unless, and this also goes to Windows 10 people who won't get the update. If you're running a third-party antivirus, it's a mixed bag of which ones are blocking the update and which ones are allowing it, which is causing a big aggravation. For whatever reason, lots of the enterprise antivirus companies are blocking this update for reasons unknown. Microsoft's got a blurb about it. But if you're, and I've actually recommended this to a lot of people, don't bother running third-party ones because they're all equally awful. So just run the Windows Defender. And when Microsoft was actually, hats off to them, as they patched quickly on this upon release, at least for Windows 10. They're showing their you should be on Windows 10 so by waiting till Tuesday to release the rest of the updates. But updating your browser is probably your biggest threat to mitigate. Is make sure your browser's up to date and don't use Edge. I don't know when Edge is getting an update, but Firefox is up to date. Google Chrome, I'm looking at you. I think they said not till January 23rd.
Oh, so that's
So if you're not on Canary, if you're not running one of the betas, I believe
another week or so.
it's about a week before they're going to have it implemented in the production one. I don't know if they've upped the timeline on it, but last I checked, I think it was January 23rd was their predicted release date.
All right.
All right. We've had a meltdown over it. We speculated enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's make this a Specter ghost to the past.
Yeah.
Moving on. But I think good knowledge. It is a big topic. So,
Definitely.
last thing I will add, kernel. This is our first iteration. These kernel hits and things like that. The speed prawns. This is the first iteration. Undoubtedly, someone's going to look at it and go, "Oh yeah, if I move this over here, it may get faster." So these speed hits we're going on the side of caution and security, get the tinfoil hats on. But later we may go, we can still optimize better by doing something else.
Absolutely.
So we will see improvements like we always do with code. The first 10,000 lines are always the worst. Every iteration gets better.
Good.
That's right.
Yep. We have music.
Music. Oh.
Oh.
We
Eartha,
will.
We
Tony,
will,
I
that's
think
right.
that hat is just a little too tight.
Maybe.
Tony's got a Red Wings.
We got-
Well,
cap
yeah.
on. I actually like it though because it's
Yeah,
you look very stylish
think it's
over
'cause
there
that-
with your shades of green.
yeah. I stayed up too late watching TV last night.
Me too.
Oh,
That
okay.
Travelers show on
Oh.
Netflix. Yeah.
I was at a party.
I love that there's more sci-fi coming out. It's making me so happy.
I watched the movie Bright. I thought it was really cool.
Yes.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
Super cyberpunk, and then
Mhm.
elves and orcs. It,
Yeah,
So-
it hit the right
It,
spots
it
for
you
me.
take
They
Lord of the
signed up-
Rings and makes it.
They signed up
modern
for
day.
part 2. They're going to make another one.
Hmm.
But I think it's a prequel. But I believe Will Smith's going to be in it.
Hey, that's all right. I
'Cause the
just
other-
want to see more of that world.
Yes. There was people complaining, and this is my little rant on it. People complaining about they didn't give backstory. They drop you in a world with humans, orcs, and that with zero backstory because it's modern day times, but we got orcs and elves and fairies.
Yeah.
And someone's like, "Well, there's no backstory,"
It
and I'm
must
like,
be in Iceland. You
Well,
know,
yeah.
they have all those little people. You know, they,
but it fit a good narrative. The story was engaging. The story was it was an action movie. It was a buddy cop movie, so there is some things like that with these couple added twists. And then sometimes I don't think it needs backstory. It just they drop me in a world. I get enough information so I can follow the storyline. I am entertained by it, and therefore I liked it. That's if you picked it apart because you didn't get a backstory, well, go write one. I don't know. Just not everything needs a backstory of how the car got there. Just be happy they're in the car together, and that story's not about the car. It's about the life of them together. It's
Yeah. All right. So I did find music.
oh good.
All right. So let's do the.
The outgoing music for this week's show.
All right. So the outgoing music is I found it on cchits.net. I talked a little bit about it in the past, where it's kind of like a voting system that people can do for Creative Commons music.
okay.
And this one is number one for
Can
this
we
week.
vote, or is it too late?
But it's called "Show Me What You Got" by AY-14ICE. So let's see. It says it has blues, pop, and soul.
Sounds good.
Boy, I like the way you move your body. I can't get enough of it, honey. The way you look at me really turns me on. Come closer, I'm not gonna wait long. Can't see you feeling the same. Even if I don't know your name, I don't care 'cause I like your style. So you're gonna be mine this night. So I hope that you will be nice. You will be nice to me. You better run away. You better run away. May I ask you will treat me right. 'Cause tonight I will make you cry tonight. Show me what you got. Show me what you got. Hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got. Hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got. Hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got. Hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got. Hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got. Hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got. Hey, show me what you got.
All right. Yeah. So if you want to get the full version of that song, check out the show notes or listen to our edited version, and be the full version of the song in there. So we've come to the end of the show.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. So you've been listening to episode 262.
Are you asking me or telling me?
I remembered this time.
Okay. The Specter of a Meltdown.
Yeah, this is Tony Bemis.
Mary Talmadge.
Phil Parada.
And Tom Lawrence.
See you next time.
You've been listening to the Sunday Morning Linux Review. If you would like more information about this or other shows, go to smlr.us. Feel free to send comments to show@smlr.us or give us a call at 734-258-7009. I'm John Miller. If you don't like it, you can
Bite my 8-bit metal ass. That's bite with a Y.
All right. So for everybody that's still watching on YouTube, we're gonna take a short break, but we are gonna be right back to
The fresh looks.
with the Fresh Looks episode.
A surprise fresh looks.
Yeah, so stay tuned, and I'll get some music going so you guys can listen to something while
Alright,
we're
All right.
doing this.
One more.
Music. I need to just add this to my desktop. Whatever the thing. Yeah, there we go. Why I haven't done that in the past?
Who are you talking to?
My YouTube friends. We have 4 people watching right now.
Hey,
All
thank
right.
you very much.
Yeah.
Before we chop up the show, or before Tom chops up the show, I misspoke. So the Kaiser patch that I had mentioned, Kaiser was actually a fix for Meltdown, and it came out of Austria from a group of researchers called TU Graz. So I just wanted to mention that, and also when I said PTI, it stands for page
Pardon the
table
interruption. Oh.
page table isolation, not page table instruction.
Oh.
So sorry about that.
Yeah, so don't send any feedback on that. We know it.
I fact myself. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Because I would not have known that.
All right.
Look at Tony, I have this set up like this.
Rubber rooms and taking fun pills, filling up on notes and dollar bills. It's the price you pay for feeling okay. You're the strangest girl I've ever met, sending weird signals to my head. I've been thinking about fixing my brain, but I'm afraid I won't feel the same. 'Cause baby, it's all I do. I've been thinking about fixing my brain, but I'm afraid I won't feel the same. 'Cause baby, it's all I do. Spending more and more time up in bed, thinking about the things I think you said. It's been on my mind, and it's hard to find. Bad habits come and go. I'm afraid my mind is getting slow. I've been thinking about fixing my brain, but I'm afraid I won't feel the same. 'Cause baby, it's all I do. I've been thinking about fixing my brain, but I'm afraid I won't feel the same. 'Cause baby, it's all I do. I swear it's not so hard to understand. I just wanna get in the sun again, the sun again, the sun again, the sun again. I swear it's not so hard to understand. I just wanna get in the sun again, the sun again, the sun again, the sun again. there's no place you feel at home, and you think you'd be better off alone. When you think there's no reason to try, and you hate yourself and wanna die. When you're filled with anxiety, everyone's your enemy. When you wish you were someone else, and you wanna go out and kill yourself. Ooh, you're overreacting. You're overreacting. When you get yourself depressed because you think you can't do your best. When you write yourself a stupid song to remind yourself that you forgot. Ooh, you're overreacting. Ooh, you're overreacting. You're overreacting. Okay, so you're feeling all alone. I heard it on the radio, in a broadcast from the sky. And someday I'm gonna rock the boat, and I'm gonna wanna know why it's a great day to be outside. Kick me out with your emotions at night, then you can't shoot me down over the ocean. Silence and death haven't the heart to get. Maybe by the time we meet, you can recognize a change in me. Baby, certain death haven't had a chance to yet. Maybe by the time we meet, you can recognize a change in me. Yeah, I can count the times that cross my mind. Sick in bed and dying for something I don't have and will never have. Your best friends won't be your friends anymore. They won't pretend anymore to let you down. Try at night, then you can shoot me down over the ocean and surrender. Haven't had the heart to yet. Maybe by the time we meet, you can recognize a change in me. Baby, surrender. Haven't had the chance to yet. Maybe by the time we meet, you can recognize a change in me. Yeah. I wanna do my own thing, but I think I followed a trend. It's been suggested, maybe I wanna be your best friend. Yeah, blocking my eye holes and just trying hard to see. I can tell by your middle finger that you're warming up to me. Yeah. Satisfaction, yeah. Satisfaction, yeah. Satisfaction, yeah. Satisfaction. You got the nonsense, but I wanna give it to you some more. Talk through the window, then you try to show me the door. Yeah, where I put the sunshine, baby.
9 smiles today.
We'll call it smiles. I like that.
All right, let's do an audio test real quick. Audio test. Let's fix myself first. All right.
Hey, test, test. Do I sound better now? Don't I sound better?
Yeah.
See that? Look at that. And I can type.
Phil?
Test, test.
And I can
test.
make coffee.
Raspberry Pi server tool.
Pi
right.
server tool.
Yes.
Raspberry
Pi
Jam.
server tool.
It's just
Tool
a
server pie.
pie knife.
Pie knife. How many Raspberry Pi puns can we come up with during this? As part of our cycle?
The Sunday Morning Linux Review
Oh,
with
yes.
Mary Toman.
I love Raspberry
Nothing
Pi.
seedy about this.
Oh, man.
Alright.
Can you seed your torrents with
Yeah.
a Raspberry Pi?
Oh, there you go. That's another good one.
That would
All right,
actually be a
Tony.
good use for this project.
All right.
All
Yes.
right.
All right. How's the audio testing going over
I
there,
think
Tony?
we're good to go.
All right. Good.
Great. Awesome.
All right. So hi everybody back on YouTube. We're coming
Yeah.
back on. And we're gonna start our Fresh Looks episode.
With Mary Tomich, Tom Lawrence, and Tony Bemis as the Beaver.
And this is episode 261.
Yep. It's a Fresh Looks episode.
Yeah.
And it's a Fresh Looks episode looking at the Raspberry Pi server.
Yeah, Pi server.
Pi server.
And we're gonna talk about Pi server and the different uses around it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Tony Bemis.
Mary Tomich.
Phil Parada.
Head Tom Lawrence.
All right. So just the other day, there was a
Gather around your
that's right.
laptops, everybody. We're going to have a story. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
Go
there-
ahead, Tony.
on raspberrypi.org, their blog, they posted an article about the Pi server. And what I didn't realize, and I probably heard this a while back, but I forgot about it. Is that you can now boot your Raspberry Pi 3 off the network. You don't have to
Hooray.
have an SD card.
This is so cool.
Yeah,
I mean, this is
I was pretty surprised when I saw that.
yeah. So it's pretty cool. So you can have projects that
So that's like a Pixie boot, right?
exactly. It
Okay.
is. It's Pixie Boot or Boot P or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
similar things. But yeah, it's Pixie Boot is the base of it. And So this Pi server is was developed by the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and and what it is now is that you have a Raspberry or you run an x86 server with or running uh, Raspbian Stretch,
Mm-hmm.
not Raspbian, Debian Stretch, just
Okay.
straight up
So just a
Debian.
regular box you got sitting out there. It doesn't have to be a powerful one. Just it's got to be a box. It's running
Mhm.
Debian Stretch.
Right, and
Okay.
it has to have some side of a file system on it,
Okay.
so
Sure. Sure.
and that's where all the files that all of your client Raspberry Pis are going to have is held. Their file systems will be held on this server,
Okay.
um, and it's you network boot it, and you network boot the Raspberry Pi. It checks over to the Pi server, and then it boots up and does its thing.
Now, how does it know to do that? Is there something kind of hard coded in the Pi, the client
Mm,
Pi itself, or is there?
no, the magic behind Pixie Boot is DHCP.
Okay.
So what happens is when this happens with all DHCP, so PCs, phones, everything. When it boots up, it sends out a broadcast message to any server that's connected on the local network or whatever
Here I
your network
am.
can be
Here I am.
programmed to do to
Yeah.
send on somewhere
Yeah.
else. And it's saying, "Hey, I need an IP address, and give me your whatever else DHCP is going to give me." There's a bunch of different info you can get from DHCP. So typically, your phone and your PC, all it gets is an IP address, a netmask and gateway, DNS, and maybe a domain name and a couple other things. So those are your basics. Then there's a lot more that can be added in with DHCP options. And one of those options is network boot, so Pixie boot stuff. So it redirects you over. It says, "Oh, do you want to boot from here? You go over to this TFTP server, pull down the image from there, and you can boot." And that's what this is based off of. And it's been around for a long time. Pixie Boot
Mm-hmm.
has been around for a long
Oh, I
time.
remember seeing it, references to it, and reading about it
And
5 years ago.
I'll
I
actually
think,
make a
wasn't it?
Yeah,
fun-
even a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
But
Tony sent this the other day, and I haven't had time to try and install any of it. But one of the cool things you can do with pfSense, you can specify TFTP server based on MAC address. So we have a TFTP server for Pixie Boot tools we use over the network, which we boot Linux over the network to test machines.
Mhm.
But I can actually run the Raspberry Pis on the same network. I just take their MAC addresses, and you can specify which TFTP they get versus that. This is really cool.
now that'll do. Doing it that way is possible.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more manual configuration. Where if you do it through the Pi server tool,
Yes.
then it goes through and sets up a lot more of it for you. Like there's a lot more options, and it makes it easier. And that was one of the things I was messing around with my pfSense box was just to set up another network with no DHCP server, because then when you run this Pi
it runs
server,
as the Pis. It
it
runs as the
runs the DHCP server, and then it gives off all those options for you.
It might be a simple workaround. There's an option called Next DHCP server. If you go into pfSense and just say these MAC addresses get the next DHCP server, and you specify that, so they say, "Oh, you're not the DHCP server," and it may hand it off.
Mm,
That I haven't used that before because we use ours as a DHCP, but it is one of the protocol options called Next. So try
Yeah.
this one next. So I'm not the one for you.
yeah, I think more commonly it's considered DHCP relay or
Well, relaying is a little bit different than Next. There's two spots. One's relaying DHCP, where you just forward everything as a relay, which is supported in pfSense. The other option is called Next. I believe it's called Next DHCP because it was when you're setting up the fog tool. There's a way to do that. You specify the computers you want to be on the Next DHCP server. I believe that's the right protocol. I haven't tested it. Tom could be wrong again.
yeah, that'd be interesting to see how that works, because the basis or I guess insecurity of DHCP is whoever answers first
Yeah,
gives the
and
information.
it answers first and then hands off next.
But
Oh, you're right,
the
because
Pi
of
server is sitting inside the same network as
right.
that,
What the hell?
so
It is how to know.
one might respond
Yeah,
first to the other. So
that's interesting. You're right.
I would suggest just shutting off DHCP on your router, and then let Pi server run it.
Okay.
Um, and
What if you
it's
subnet it?
Yeah, that's what he's going to do.
it's
Is kind of
yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean
missed
that's what I would do.
Mhm.
And subnetting still is valid. You know anybody can do this, even at home as easily. But really, it's simpler. You don't call it subnetting. You would call it more just putting another router inside your network.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Create a
So-
segmented network.
I do
Yeah.
that at home. I have
Yes.
2 routers. I got my AT&T one, and then I have my other one,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
all my stuff goes off the sub the second router.
Right, and you can get just a cheap Linksys, wired router for $10 on eBay or
Mhm.
whatever, and it would easily run something like this. You just make sure you turn off DHCP, and then and run everything else defaults on it. It would
So-
be good.
I've never really thought about this. So apparently there is not a BIOS per se, but a savable, flashable memory where you're setting this config essentially, right?
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
realize that.
I'm
So,
either.
yeah, so what it is to set up the Pi itself to be able to boot off the network is you first have to boot from a SD card, and then you run a command or put in a file into the boot config boot /boot /config.txt file, and when you reboot, it turns on um, the Pixie boot or the network booting, and then you pull it, and then it says to pull that line back out and then take the SD card out, and you're good to go. And so then it'll start booting off a Pixie boot or network booting, and then your Pi
Can you set
server.
this up at home?
I have not,
Okay.
but this, yeah, that would be my plan.
Mm-hmm.
And what's neat is you can run any OS, or not any Pi OS, and you can go through and choose per Raspberry Pi that connects in, which OS it gets and what file store, where its
Mhm.
file system is going to be. So you can have many Raspberry Pi projects running inside your house, and it will just boot whatever you tell it to. And so you can have, like Tom was just suggesting, a Pi project called Cayenne.
Yeah. Project Cayenne.
Yeah. So, and it's like an IoT thing.
That's
yeah,
a hot
right?
one.
It's a
Yeah, it's pretty hot. But say if you have, and basically what it is, you connect up IoT sensors to your Pi, and it reports back the information,
Yep.
and then stuff happens, really cool stuff.
It's really slick.
But with it related to this, what you would be able to do is those sensors are related or are limited to the length of the little wire that you have it connected
Right.
to, right, to the Pi. So unless you, or if you don't want to
Well, some
run
of the sensors
wiring
are
all
actually
over your
wireless,
house, right?
but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, what you would be able to do is say you have one Raspberry Pi in a garage to run sensors in the garage. You have another Raspberry Pi, in your kitchen to run sensors in the kitchen, and one in your utility room. Well, what you'd be able to do is use this Pi server to go through and have all the file systems held on the Pi server, and they all check into the Pi server to boot up and run.
Well, another scalable where I'm actually, the Project Cayenne has some demo projects, and this is very related. So if you built it on top of this, I'm thinking of some of my industrial clients who would be very interested in this.
Oh yeah.
Because they have large manufacturing plants, and this is really interesting. I actually didn't know I started something. I showed how Raspberry Pi works to one of my clients. They end up building a control module, and it repurposes 30-year-old CNC machines to be modern day.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
they actually turned it into a selling product that they sell the device to reattach to a serial interface on old CNC machines to breathe new life into them. And
Nice.
it was started with did you know you can connect a Raspberry Pi? And he says, you can? That's interesting.
Hmm.
And he took it, and I'd seen him like a while later. He never even told me he was doing this because he just didn't think I'd be interested. I'm like, I want to do an interview with you. What do you mean interested?
That's
and
cool.
yeah, he built a really cool project out of it. And it's the same concept. So you could repurpose all these old devices, or he started with, I just want to watch the devices because we put it's got a machine apart, and it takes 2 hours to machine, and there's 20 machines machining apart at different intervals. And we see something to babysit and watch the machine. And if it goes too far, or this little switch trip this switch, and let the Raspberry Pi let us know. And these CNC machines are like $20,000 a piece. So
Yeah.
spending $35 on a pie for each one, really minor upgrade.
Very.
Yeah,
And be
those are
able
the-
to
those are the
orchestrate
cheap
these with
CNC
this.
machines.
Yeah, those are the well, they're old. That's
Oh, yeah.
so they are old and they're more manual. The new ones are over 100 something thousand and are
Mhm.
very automated, and they can't afford those. So they automated the old ones because they all ran on DOS and there's no more updates for it.
Right.
Do you think with improvements to processor technology that those older CNC machines are now more accurate with the Pi inside of them?
Probably they've added more sensors to them. It's really, I mean, they were always able to machine to incredible tolerances. It was just getting that data to them was a challenge. They used to have
Mhm.
all these conversions, and they were still using floppy disks. They had newer computers copying
Mhm.
data to floppies on USB floppy drives to get the data into these really old machines. They had all kinds of steps that were real painful. Now that they've automated some of it, they've made programming options on just put it into a Pi.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry,
Or you can,
I lost disk 99 again.
Yes.
yeah. Or you can go through and pull out the old hardware that's failing. You know,
Yes.
like the DOS machine that has to connect over the long haul serial connection out to the where the CNC machine is, and
Oh, their network is they have a muxer. I don't know if you've ever seen those. You know what I'm talking about? They have a serial mux system. They have serial cables run to all their CNC machines that was
Mhm.
done in the late 80s, early 90s. Still works. Those
Wow.
muxers, like there's a lot of slime on it.
Yeah.
I've had to touch the box and move stuff. Water soluble oil creates slime if you didn't know. It's dirty
Yeah.
there.
Anyway, so on
Yeah.
on that same idea of running Raspberry Pis out there, but in industrial,
Mhm.
if one of those dies, you just go in and update the MAC address on your Pi server,
Yep.
and it boots right up to what it was doing before. So it's a really easy to recover
It's also
system.
easy when to scalably update all of them. Just reboot them and they'll have the latest version on there. Because they'll pull the new image again, and now they've all been updated to the latest iteration of your tool.
Yeah. Yep.
This is really cool.
And then you can do LDAP authentication. So you set up a few users inside the Pi server, and then you can go through. So say this would be more applicable to a classroom or a library kind of setting. Is you set up your set of users, and then you can go to any of the Pis and sit down and log in with that username and password, and they'll all authenticate back to Pi server for you.
This might be fun for the upcoming Penguin Con because they're always looking at inexpensive ways to do labs, and you can run essentially a desktop on these, and this is an easy way to reset the lab.
Absolutely. Same for school classrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at some code from this project and also a picture here. So what stops a person from just plugging in a Raspberry Pi? Some malicious person. Well, you can do MAC address filtering through the Pi server itself. It's got a nice little check mark box. You can say all of these Pis I know about, and here we go.
And deploy.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And then so if you don't know about it, then it doesn't get the image, and then it doesn't
Yep.
This is really cool.
get in. Yeah.
This is an advanced project.
They made, from the looks of it, this looks super simple to use.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
I was thinking that too. I was thinking, oh, I should just go buy some of these and try it. And then I realized, oh, add that to my list of
Hmm.
50 projects.
I feel the same way. I'm like, the good news is I have pies. I got 2 of them.
Yeah. See, I don't have any. Well, no, I have one, but my friend Ruth is using it.
Hmm.
I gotta check with her and see what she's doing.
So
Maybe she's doing one of these.
what's interesting is I was scrolling through, reading the article, and then at the end there's comments. One of the comments is, what is this project different than the PiNet project? Have you heard of PiNet?
Right now, I just heard.
No.
Yeah. So PiNet.
Why don't you share with us?
PiNet is really geared toward education and creating
Okay.
like computer labs. And what PiNet does is it's the same thing, network booting Raspberry Pis.
Mm-hmm.
The project is actually like 2 years old. So it's been around for a bit longer. But what it's based off of the LTSP project, or Linux Terminal Server project.
Boy, that project's been around for a long time.
Yeah, and there's a guy local that built it.
Jim Quillen.
Jim
I think?
McQuillan. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's
Yep.
the president of one of the lugs, MUG,
Mhm.
the Michigan Users Group.
I first met them in 1999 at the Toledo Linux Fest, which
Toledo.
There was one in Toledo.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, it was run
Wow.
by University of Toledo, or
I think so.
yeah.
My gray hairs are showing now, man, as I was there. 99 or 2000. It was.
Mhm.
It's been about 18 years now. So
Wow.
Yeah. So he's not active. Uh, he doesn't run the project anymore, but it's really cool. It's run off of that, and I have messed with that project years ago, probably 10 years ago, with Ubuntu, and Ubuntu was a spin, and I'm not sure if it's still active or not, but Ubuntu was based off of LTSP, and it was the same thing with old old PCs that you have one server running, and you can network boot all these PCs, and it would boot up to a desktop. And there was a lot of cool tools that you could take over desktops and to be able to present it to everybody and things like that. So it was great for education and that kind of stuff. Um, so there's PyNet, and the
it's really
biggest difference
cool.
between the two I see is that PyNet is really geared toward classroom stuff, where Pi Server is still network boot. You can tell it what image to boot from, but you can tell it just a base image and then build something off of that. So you can do a lot more customizing that if you need. It's not just a classroom or lab kind of setup.
This can get really interesting. After you pixie boot the image, you could then have configuration management run and configure anything else that you needed.
Right? Yeah, have something like Ansible or something.
Yeah, exactly. If I I can count the amount of times that I've plugged in an SD card to a Pi and then gone, it's dead. And then
Yeah.
had to go to the store, and then it completely throws off the flow of your project.
Yes.
Now with this,
Mary's actually run into that too. You get the red flash of death
yeah,
or whatever that Raspberry Pi does, and it's because the SD card's bad or
Mhm.
corrupt or something.
Well, and you have the inherent problem of read write swap files on SD cards causing wear leveling. They're just not they're made for a lot of read and writes, but not the expectation of file system read and writes, which are pretty intensive. You've now offloaded the file system read and write, so you actually make a more survivable device.
Hmm.
um, just to bring up Eddie Ubuntu, I looked it up because it's been a moment since I've heard that. They've skipped the 16.04 release, so they're still on 14.04.
Mm.
They're going until ends in 2019. But after that, if no one steps up, I believe that project is going to be dead.
Mm. Yeah, it's been with 1404, so it's been 3 years since the major release. But um, yeah. Anyway, so I can see a lot of really cool things you'll be able to do with Pi Server. I mean, like we're talking, the IoT stuff or industrial stuff, or just it would actually be really cool to do clustering and have it all
Yeah.
build a cluster and have again all the file system is held off onto this other server, and then you could pair that file system with an NFS or iSCSI or something connection over to a FreeNAS. So then it's backed up on your FreeNAS with ZFS and
We actually, because we're running one of the open source projects for deployment tools called Clone Deploy, and it runs on ZFS and FreeNAS as it runs that on a system, and that's how we do images of all these computers. Matter of fact, I may fix Mary's hard drive with that same tool.
hey,
That'd be pretty cool. And just think we'd be able to talk about it as what we did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an open source cloning tool, and it does clone both Windows and Linux
awesome. Um,
over PXE.
oh yeah.
That's how it relates to this.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm trying to think of what else is there to talk about
So
with this.
here's where this gets even more fun because I have a virtualization server at home, and I'm gonna actually test this because I have my worries because it's so extensive. My Pi emulator that I have, which runs the what is that called?
Main.
RetroPie.
Yes.
The RetroPie system. That's what I use my Raspberry Pi for because I have a thing for retro games. But I do worry because you customize or you get so far in Zelda and, there's a lot of save files in there. I'm worried I'm going to wear out my SD card. So I may convert my RetroPie image to an image on here. And I feel more confident and I can just boot it up whenever I want.
Inside the comments, there's a comment that says there's no console version of Pi Server, but a guy does have a couple of steps to run it headless, and then
Really?
you can X11 forward through SSH to
Oh.
configure setting it up from your laptop.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, and that's how I'd run it. If I would run it headless. And
How good does
The
XLab
actually-
record in working? I actually have never tried it.
Works every time I've needed it.
Okay.
yeah, I've done it on the internal network, and
Yeah.
I've never
Okay.
done it across the internet. But so one other thing that you do is it's not just straight Debian and then their tool. So if you install Debian Stretch, and then you install the Raspberry Pi desktop, which is actually pretty neat, uh, lightweight desktop. But that desktop has the Pi server tool that you need. Um, and so there was one more thing I was going to say. Oh, so it says, and then to add software, there's you can have it look for a script, and they said as the project builds, then they'll have more programs that you could just throw in the script, pre-built for you.
But you
to
can
make it
use some of your
easy.
probably existing images, like my RetroPie image. So
Yeah, yep, and it's not read-only images, so you could have one Pi boot up, and
Right.
then you log into that and you set up, you install stuff, and just
Yep.
like you would a regular
and
Raspberry
then you
Pi.
can write that back and then clone an image. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So I can actually put a Raspberry Pi in each of my TVs and then shut down one, save it to the other, push it over, and my save game for Zelda will be there. This is the future. I mean, these are the things that really matter when it's all said and done.
Yeah. Um,
Which I need to do that again is I usually beat Zelda every year. That's my
yeah.
on the old Nintendo because that's my relaxation. I can't progress to new games apparently.
So cool. Yeah, and so
I really
mean,
like this.
Yeah, there's a lot of commercial uses. Like I said, labs. You could do
Libraries.
libraries, internet kiosks, TV systems.
Deploy a bunch of Raspberry Pi crypto miners,
So
which are super inefficient.
exactly. Or
Hey,
even
speaking
like
of that, I don't know if I mentioned this, but Opera browser has incorporated in its latest version some anti-crypto mining
Yes.
features.
Mm,
So, okay, back to the Pi.
yeah, you guys have talked about the was it the soccer stadium that's in Detroit?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there is no
And-
soccer stadium. Oh, you're talking about? Oh,
Detroit City FC,
oh yeah. You're talking about Keyworth.
Ewer Stadium.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Tom had worked there. You set
Yeah.
up like their
We did all
Wi-Fi,
their
right?
outdoor Wi-Fi and
Right.
Mhm.
stuff. Yeah.
Mary's been there, and
Yep, I have.
it makes me think that they have TVs all around the place, so they can run advertisements or the
Yes.
game or whatever. You could run Raspberry Pis in the back end of that, and then control it all from a Pi server like this.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be really.
There's
neat.
actually
Good
a
idea.
project called Pi Signage. We have a proposal in for a client. It's really cool because you can change signage based on Raspberry Pis that are distributed everywhere. You upload to a central server. They constantly are querying that server for new files. It's a really cool project I want to do a
Yeah.
review on. We've tested it here, plugged a Raspberry Pi in, and anywhere, like from a graphics company, you can push out updates to a central server. The Pis just keep querying that server and go, hey, look, there's a new graphic to display. It's going to be for safety for a large industrial company that's held all their safety notices, and everything's going to go out across their facilities across the U.S.
Nice.
That's awesome.
It's a really cool project because one central office or whoever can just push an update and it's all secure. It's all done through SSL. I believe it uses Let's Encrypt certificates too. Is one of the ways you just got to have an SSL server, but you can use it for that too. So
Yeah.
That always makes me feel good.
yeah. So now that we got a whole relationship over here.
Yeah, and like I said, the coolest thing about these is that because there's no SD card on it, that you can just, if it dies, just send out a replacement. So if it's across the country or something, you just ship one over to them. They plug it in.
I like that
And
because
then,
that's my concern is, and we've talked about the Pi of Death here. It is often the SD card. Rarely have I ever seen a Raspberry Pi ever go bad, but SD cards just the read-write file system is not keen to an SD card. SSDs are designed differently to handle lots of read-writes. SSD cards are like used for putting in cameras and having limited amounts of read-writes.
Mhm. Yeah.
So this is
And
definitely
it's more the
interesting.
write than the read that does it. right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Because to write to an SD card, you got to break the electrical membrane to push the data into it. Versus reading it, you just go over and pull the data back
Pull
out.
it
So
out.
each time
Okay.
that does that, you create a wear level. So
Very cool. All right. So without just filling more space of random
Yes,
talking, then
but
I
it's
guess
good.
we can end.
Yes, we can.
Randomly
But I've had so much coffee, I can randomly talk now. I'm excited about this. We'll leave the links in the show notes to the Pi server and also to the Pi EDU. That is the, I'm sorry, the
PiNet.
PiNet, which is the pinet.org.uk. That's a cool project too. It's directly related to this, but more focused on schools. So if you are someone in a school wanting to spread the Raspberry Pi love around, it's a good project.
Yeah.
We were supposed to come up with Raspberry Pi puns, and we did not.
Yeah, we did. The CD.
Not
is
enough.
it-
Cayenne and
Oh yeah,
hot
Yeah,
and
remember that?
spicy
Yeah,
pies.
that's
Cayenne.
Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe there's
So-
not enough of them, but it was so
Well,
good.
the only thing I was wondering is, with that SD card, whether you have to slice it or not
Oh,
you
there we go.
for partitions. Yeah, you got it.
And
Okay, it was weak. Admittedly, it was weak.
and related to our previous episode, there's no meltdown of the pie. The pie won't melt down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
All right.
All right.
Great. Well,
So
that
you've
was
been-
interesting. Thanks,
yeah.
Tony, for coming to talk about that topic. Thanks for visiting us, Tony, to talk about that topic.
And teaching Tom something completely new because I had no idea you could
Yeah.
network PXE boot a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
no
pretty
idea
cool.
at all.
All right, so I guess we're coming to the end. So you've been listening to the Sunday Morning Linux Review. This was episode 263,
Raspberry Pi server
and this is
or
Tony
Pi
B-
server.
Pi server. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, that was one more thing I wanted to say. Right. So I guess we're not gonna- if you Google Pi server, then you'll find a really old Indiegogo for a Pi server, but that's like a hardware enclosure. It's not this project that we're talking about.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So
This is a different way to serve your pie.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So the article that I'm referencing, we'll have the link,
link
in the show notes. Yeah, but it's blogs raspberrypi.org/blog/pi server, just PI server, and it was published 3 days ago from now. So that was on the 4th,
Yep.
January 4th. So check that out.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, now we can actually end the show.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was Tony Bemis.
Mary Tomich.
Phil Parada.
And Tom Lawrence.
See you next time.
You've been listening to the Sunday Morning Linux Review. If you would like more information about this or other shows, go to smlr.us. Feel free to send comments to show@smlr.us or give us a call at 734-258-7009. I'm John Miller. If you don't like it, you can
Bite my 8-bit metal ass. That's bite with a Y.
All right. And so thank you for being on YouTube
Yeah, thank
for
you.
listening. Remember to check out our website, smlr.us, and like us on YouTube's
On the YouTubes.
and share us. Yeah.
Share the
How
love.
many listeners do we have?
We
watching?
have 3 still on right now.
We lost how many? No. So thank
Uh,
you.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.